Stop this wedding! The scream tore through St. Patrick's Cathedral like a lightning strike, splitting the sky in half. 600 heads turned as one. Politicians in tailored Armani suits, business tycoons dripping with Patek Philippe watches, Mafia bosses whose names made grown men tremble. Every single one of them froze, mouths hanging open at the impossible scene unfolding before their eyes. There, in the center of the marble aisle, beneath the soaring stained glass windows worth millions, a maid in a torn black uniform was dragging Dante Fontaine, the most feared man in Chicago, toward the coat room, like a child being pulled home by his mother. Her chestnut brown hair had fallen loose from its braid. Her amber brown eyes blazed with tears and something far more dangerous. Absolute certainty. Dirt streaked her face. Blood stained her knees. She looked like she'd crawled through hell itself to get here. And Dante Fontaine, the man who could end lives with a single phone call, the man who'd built an empire on fear and precision, simply let her. Vivian Ashford, the bride radiant in a $1 million Vera Wang gown that caught the light like diamonds on fire, went from pale shock to crimson rage in 3 seconds flat. Security! Drag this psychopath out now! Her voice cracked like a whip. She's insane. She's trying to ruin, but the maid didn't even glance at her. She tightened her grip on Dante's wrist, fingers white-knuckled, and said just loud enough for the front row to hear, "They're going to kill you. The champagne. Don't drink it. Please." Guards in black suits surged forward from every corner, hands reaching for concealed weapons. One word from Dante and this girl would disappear. Forever. Everyone knew what happened to people who disrespected the Fontaine family. But Dante didn't give the order. Instead, for the first time in 3 years, for the first time since his sister Isabella died, something flickered behind those ice-gray eyes. Not anger. Recognition. His lips parted. His jaw tightened. And then, in a voice so low only the maid could hear it, he whispered, "Who sent you?" The maid's face crumpled. Tears spilled over. "Nobody sent me. I found the letters. I know what happened to Isabella. I know who killed her." Her voice broke. "And if you marry Vivian Ashford today, you'll be dead by midnight." The cathedral held its breath. Vivian's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. Just for a moment, just long enough for those watching closely to see the flash of pure, naked panic cross her face before the mask of indignation slammed back into place. Dante stared at the maid. This woman he'd fired just 24 hours ago. This woman he'd called a thief and a liar. This woman who had absolutely nothing to gain and everything to lose by being here. And yet here she stood, trembling, terrified, but standing. The guards were 3 steps away now. Their shadows swallowed her whole. Then Dante raised one hand. A simple gesture, but absolute. "Wait." The guards stopped like statues. The entire cathedral seemed to tilt on its axis. And Dante Fontaine, the man who trusted no one, let this dirty, desperate maid pull him through the heavy oak doors into the coat room beside the altar. The door slammed shut. Silence crashed down like a tidal wave. Vivian stood alone in the center of the church in her $1 million gown, bouquet trembling in her hands, smile frozen on her face like a mask made of glass. 1 minute passed, 2, 5. The whispers started slow, then built to a roar. Who is that girl? What could she possibly have that would make him listen? Is the wedding off? What's happening in there? Nobody knew. Nobody knew that behind that closed door, an empire built on lies was about to crumble. Nobody knew that a maid with nothing to her name except courage and 3 dying siblings was about to rewrite the fate of Chicago's most powerful family. And nobody knew that 48 hours ago, this entire catastrophe had begun with nothing more than a shattered teacup and a woman too kind for her own good. If you want to know who this mysterious maid really is, what she discovered, and what happened behind that door, hit that like button right now and don't you dare look away. Because this story is about to get wild. 72 hours before that wedding would nearly happen, Elena Moretti sat in a plastic chair outside the ICU at University of Chicago Medical Center. Hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of disinfectant burned her nostrils. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight, her shift at the cafe, then cleaning the Fontaine estate, then washing dishes at the restaurant, then sewing clothes at home until 3 in the morning. Her eyes felt like sandpaper. Her body screamed for rest. But rest was a luxury she couldn't afford. Dr. Patel emerged from the ICU, his face grave. Elena shot to her feet, heart hammering. "Miss Moretti." His voice was kind but firm. "We need to talk about Marco." Elena's breath caught. "Is he? He's stable." "For now." Dr. Patel pulled off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose. But his leukemia is progressing faster than we anticipated. The chemotherapy isn't working anymore. He needs a bone marrow transplant. Immediately, the floor seemed to tilt beneath Elena's feet. How? How long does he have? 2 weeks, maybe less. Dr. Patel met her eyes. Without the transplant, Marco won't survive past the end of the month. 2 weeks. The words echoed in Elena's skull like a death sentence. The surgery, she whispered. How much? Doctor, Patel hesitated. $380,000. That includes the transplant procedure, post-op care, immunosuppressants, hospital stay. $380,000. Elena's voice cracked. She'd been saving for 2 years, working 4 jobs, sleeping 3 hours a night, and she had $340 in her account. There are payment plans, Dr. Patel said gently. Financial aid programs, please. Elena dropped to her knees right there in the hallway, hands clasped like prayer. Please, I'll pay. I'll work. I'll do anything. Just save my brother. He's only 16. He hasn't lived yet. Please. Tears streamed down her face. She didn't care who saw. Didn't care about dignity. Doctor. Patel crouched beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. Miss Moretti, I wish I could, but the hospital board, they require a deposit of $50,000 before we can schedule the surgery, and without insurance I'll get it. I'll find a way. Elena. His voice was impossibly sad. Where are you going to find $50,000 in 2 weeks? She had no answer. Dr. Patel helped her to her feet. I'm sorry. Truly, but unless you can secure the deposit by next Friday, we'll have to discharge Marco to hospice care. Hospice. The word felt like a knife sliding between her ribs. Elena stumbled out of the hospital into the gray February afternoon. Snow fell in thick clumps, soaking through her threadbare coat. She didn't feel it. Didn't feel anything except the crushing weight of failure pressing down on her chest. The bus ride back to her apartment took 45 minutes. 45 minutes of staring at her reflection in the grimy window, seeing a ghost, 27 years old, looking 40. Dark circles under her eyes, cheekbones too sharp from skipping meals to save money for Marco's medication. When she finally climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their apartment, she found the eviction notice taped to the door. Final notice. Eviction proceedings tenant. Elena Moretti outstanding rent. $45,000, 3 months. You have 7 days to vacate the premises, or sheriff deputies will forcibly remove you and your belongings. Elena tore the notice down, crumpled it in her fist. $45,000 for rent, $380,000 for Marco, $50,000 just to start. She pushed open the door. The apartment was dark, cold. The heat had been shut off last week. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, drawing with crayons by candlelight. 12 years old, born deaf, unable to speak, but her hands moved in sign language the moment she saw Elena. Sister, you're home. Elena forced a smile. Yes, sweetheart, I'm home. Sophia's drawing showed 4 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. Elena recognized them immediately. Herself, Marco, Sophia, Lucia, a family. I drew us happy, Sophia signed, for when Marco comes home. Elena's throat closed. She knelt beside her sister, kissed her forehead. It's beautiful. A wet, hacking cough erupted from the bedroom. Elena's heart seized. She rushed in to find Lucia 8 years old, small for her age, with a congenital heart condition doubled over on the mattress they all shared. Blood speckled Lucia's palm. Lucia! Elena grabbed her sister, held her close. It's okay, baby. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Lucia needed heart surgery too. Another $250,000 Elena didn't have. The doctors said she had maybe 6 months before her heart gave out completely. On the other mattress, Marco lay beneath 3 blankets, shivering despite the fever that had spiked to 104 degrees. His skin looked gray, his breathing shallow. He opened his eyes when Elena approached. 16 years old but looking ancient. Elena. His voice was barely a whisper. Did he say? Shh. Elena pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. Don't talk. Save your strength. I heard you on the phone yesterday. $380,000. A tear slid down Marco's temple. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you have to. Stop. Elena gripped his hand. You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. You're going to be fine. I'm going to fix this. How? Marco's eyes were too knowing, too aware. Elena, you work 4 jobs and we can barely eat. How are you going to? The door slammed open. 3 men in leather jackets stormed in. The lead one, a man named Sal with a scar across his throat and knuckles covered in gold rings, smiled like a shark. Well, Elena Moretti, we've been looking for you. Elena stood, positioning herself between the men and her siblings. I told you, I need more time. I'll have your money. You've had 6 months. Sal pulled out a cigarette, lit it. You borrowed $60,000 at 40% interest. That's $84,000 now. Where is it? I don't have it, but I'm working. Not fast enough. Sal nodded to his men. They grabbed Elena by the arms, dragged her into the living room. Sophia screamed silently, hands flying in panicked signs. Lucia whimpered. Marco tried to get up but collapsed. Wait, Elena struggled. My siblings, they're children. Please, just give me 1 more week. Sal's fist slammed into her stomach. The air exploded from Elena's lungs. She doubled over, gasping. The second punch caught her cheekbone, snapping her head back. Blood filled her mouth. This is what happens when you don't pay. Sal grabbed her hair, yanked her head up. 1 week, 7 days. You bring me $84,000, or we come back. And next time, we won't be so gentle. Understand? Elena nodded, vision swimming. Good. Sal shoved her to the floor. Clock's ticking, sweetheart. They left, slamming the door behind them. Elena lay on the cold floor, tasting blood, feeling her ribs scream where Sal had kicked them. Sophia rushed over, tears streaming down her face, hands shaking as she signed. Are you okay? Are you okay? I'm fine. Elena pulled herself up, wincing. I'm fine, baby. But she wasn't fine. She looked around the apartment. At Sophia, crying silently. At Lucia, coughing blood into her hands. At Marco, barely conscious on the mattress. At the eviction notice on the table. At the hospital bills stacked in the corner. At the empty refrigerator. At the $340 she had to her name. And something inside her broke. Not her spirit. Not her will. But something deeper. The part of her that believed in rules. In working hard and playing fair. In asking for help and hoping someone would care. Nobody was coming to save them. Nobody cared if 3 children died because their sister couldn't make enough money cleaning toilets and washing dishes. Elena gathered her siblings close. Marco's fevered body. Sophia's trembling hands. Lucia's weak heartbeat against her chest. I won't let you die, she whispered into their hair. I swear to God, I will not let you die. I don't care what I have to do. I don't care what it costs me. You will live. Later, after they'd fallen asleep curled together on the mattress, Elena sat at the kitchen table and counted her money again. $340. She needed $464,000. Minimum. The numbers didn't add up. They would never add up. Not by working legally. Elena closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would go back to the Fontaine estate. She would smile and serve tea and clean toilets for $15 an hour. She would be invisible. But tomorrow night, she would become a thief. Elena arrived at the Fontaine estate at 8:45 the next morning. 20 minutes late because she'd had to wait for the free clinic to open so they could wrap her bruised ribs. The bruises from Sal's fists had bloomed purple and yellow across her stomach. Every breath felt like broken glass scraping her lungs, but she'd covered the marks with her black uniform, swallowed 4 aspirin, and smiled at the gate guard like nothing was wrong. She needed this job. $15 an hour, 6 hours a day, $90. It was a drop in the ocean of debt drowning her, but it was something. And tonight, when the estate was empty, she'd come back. She'd steal whatever she could carry. Paintings, silverware, jewelry, anything worth enough to buy Marco 1 more week of life. The thought made her sick, but desperation had a way of rewriting morality. Mrs. Hawthorne, the head housekeeper, a woman of 65 with kind eyes and silver hair pulled into a severe bun, met Elena at the servants' entrance. You're late. Her voice was stern, but her gaze lingered on the fresh bruise barely visible beneath Elena's collar. Are you all right, dear? I'm fine. Elena straightened. It won't happen again, Mrs. Hawthorne's lips pressed into a thin line. She'd worked for the Fontaine family for 40 years. She knew what poverty looked like, what desperation smelled like. Miss Ashford wants tea in the sitting room, she said quietly. Wedgwood china, the antique set. Be very careful. A warning. Elena nodded. The Fontaine estate was a mansion that belonged in a fairy tale, soaring ceilings, marble floors, crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's houses. Elena had been cleaning here for 8 months, and still felt like an intruder, like the walls themselves knew she didn't belong. She prepared the tea service with shaking hands. Wedgwood china, pale blue with gold trim, each piece worth thousands of dollars. The silver tray was so heavy her injured ribs screamed in protest, but she carried it carefully into the sitting room where Vivienne Ashford waited. Vivienne sat on a crimson velvet sofa, like a queen on a throne. 32 years old, stunningly beautiful, with platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon and ice blue eyes that missed nothing. She wore a turquoise Valentino dress that probably cost more than Elena made in a year, and her feet were crossed at the ankle, showing off red-soled Louboutin heels. She was reading a bridal magazine, planning a wedding that would cost millions. In 2 days, she would become Mrs. Dante Fontaine, mistress of this house, one of the richest women in Chicago. Elena had never hated anyone before, but looking at Vivienne dripping in wealth, complaining about which flowers to choose while Marco was dying, something dark and bitter twisted in her chest. "Your tea, Miss Ashford." Elena set the tray on the table, careful not to make a sound. Vivienne didn't look up. "About time. I've been waiting for 20 minutes. I apologize." Elena poured the Earl Grey into the delicate cup, the steam rising like a ghost. She set it on the saucer, placed it on the side table within Vivienne's reach, exactly as she'd been trained. And that's when Vivienne's hand moved. A casual flick, a calculated gesture, so fast that anyone not watching closely would have missed it. Vivienne's perfectly manicured fingers knocked the teacup off the saucer. The Wedgwood cup, an antique worth $15,000, flew through the air and shattered against the marble floor. Porcelain exploded into 100 pieces. Hot tea sprayed across the Persian rug, across the furniture, across Vivienne's $3,500 Christian Louboutin heels. Vivienne screamed, "You filthy maid!" She sprang to her feet, face contorted with rage. "Look what you've done. Do you have any idea how much these shoes cost? More than your pathetic yearly salary." Elena stood frozen, the empty tray still in her hands. "Miss Ashford, I didn't. You clumsy, worthless." Vivienne's voice cracked like a whip. "That teacup was an antique, irreplaceable, and you just dropped it like garbage." "I didn't drop it. You knocked. Are you calling me a liar?" Vivienne's eyes blazed. "You dare accuse me? In my own home?" Elena's mouth opened, closed. She'd seen what happened. She knew the truth. But who would believe a maid over the woman about to marry one of the most powerful men in Chicago? Mrs. Hawthorne stood in the doorway, face pale. She'd seen it too. Seen Vivienne knock the cup over deliberately. But she said nothing, just pressed her hand to her mouth, tears glittering in her eyes. "Clean it up," Vivienne hissed. "With your hands. Now." Elena set down the tray, knelt on the floor. Shards of porcelain cut into her knees through her uniform. She reached for the pieces, fingers trembling. "No." Vivienne's heel clicked against the marble as she stepped closer. "Not with your hands, with your tongue." Elena looked up, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "You heard me. Lick my shoes clean. Lick every drop of tea off them. Maybe that will teach you to be more careful." The room went silent. Even the grandfather clock seemed to stop ticking. Elena's ribs throbbed. Her knees bled. Her brother was dying. Her sisters were starving. She needed this job, so she bent down. She pressed her lips to the leather of Vivienne's shoe and licked the tea away. The taste of humiliation was worse than the Earl Grey. She felt something inside her die, some last fragment of dignity, of self-respect, withering to ash. Vivienne laughed. A high, delighted sound. "That's better. You look perfect down there, like the dog you are." Elena continued cleaning, tears streaming silently down her face, when Vivienne's foot moved. The needle-sharp heel drove into Elena's side, right where Sal's fist had broken her ribs the night before. The pain was white-hot, blinding. Elena gasped, tried to pull away, but Vivienne ground her heel deeper, twisting. "Don't stop," Vivienne purred. "You're not done yet." Mrs. Hawthorne turned away, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The crack of breaking bone was audible. Elena collapsed, clutching her side, vision swimming. She couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. The agony radiated through her entire body like lightning. And then footsteps. Heavy, decisive, the kind of footsteps that made everyone in the room straighten. Dante Fontaine entered the sitting room. He was 37 years old, 6'2", wearing a charcoal Tom Ford suit that fit him like a weapon. His gray eyes swept the scene, the shattered teacup, the tea-soaked rug, Vivienne standing over a maid curled on the floor. "What happened here?" His voice was ice. The kind of voice that had ordered men killed without a second thought. Vivienne's face transformed instantly. The cruel mask vanished, replaced by wounded innocence. Her eyes filled with tears. Her lip trembled. "Dante, thank God." She rushed to him, pressed herself against his chest. "I'm so sorry. I know how important your mother's Wedgwood set was to you, but this maid, she was careless. She dropped the teacup and it shattered. And then when I tried to correct her, she became aggressive. Elena stared up at them from the floor, too stunned to speak. She ruined my shoes, Vivienne continued, her voice breaking perfectly. And when I asked her to clean up her mess, she refused. She actually raised her voice at me. Dante's gaze fell on Elena. Those gray eyes, cold as a Chicago winter, revealed nothing. Is this true? Elena struggled to sit up. Every movement, agony. No. Sir, I didn't drop it. She knocked it over. I would never. She's lying. Vivienne's tears flowed freely now. I can't believe she would. After everything we've done for her, giving her a job when no one else would. Dante's jaw tightened. He looked at Elena the way someone might look at an insect. Something beneath notice, beneath contempt. I don't care about your sob story. His voice could have frozen blood. You're fired. Immediately. No. Please. Elena tried to stand, fell back. Sir, I need this job. My brother is sick. He's dying. I need the money for his treatment. Please. I'm begging you. Security. Dante didn't even look at her as he spoke into his phone. Escort this woman out. Make sure she never sets foot on my property again. 2 guards appeared within seconds, grabbed Elena by the arms, hauled her to her feet. The pain in her ribs made her vision go black for a moment. Please. Elena's voice broke. Please. I didn't do anything wrong. My siblings, they need me. Marco is only 16. He has leukemia. Sophia is deaf. Lucia has a heart condition. I'm all they have. Please. Dante turned his back on her, wrapped his arm around Vivienne, who buried her face in his chest, still crying. I'm so sorry, darling, he murmured to his fiancée. I should have vetted the staff more carefully. The guards dragged Elena through the marble halls, her pleas echoing off the walls. They threw her out the servants' entrance onto the gravel driveway. Elena fell to her hands and knees, gasping for air through broken ribs. Behind her, the iron gates of the Fontaine estate slammed shut. Final. Absolute. She'd lost her last legitimate source of income. She had $90 in her pocket from this morning's work, $340 in the bank, 3 siblings who would be dead in 2 weeks without hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now, no job at all. Elena pressed her forehead to the cold gravel and made a decision. Tonight, she would break into that mansion. She would steal everything she could carry, and if they caught her, if they killed her for it, at least she would have tried. At least she wouldn't die having done nothing while her family withered away. She pulled herself to her feet, tasted blood in her mouth from where she'd bitten her tongue, and she began planning a robbery. Elena made it home just as the sun set, painting the Chicago sky in shades of bruised purple and dying gold. Every step up the 3 flights of stairs felt like climbing a mountain with a knife in her side. The broken rib Vivienne's heel had snapped ground against itself with each breath, sending waves of nausea through her body. She clutched the railing, pulled herself up 1 step at a time, tasting blood. When she finally pushed open the apartment door, the cold hit her like a slap. Still no heat. The candles Sophia had lit earlier flickered on the kitchen table, casting dancing shadows across peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceiling. Marco lay on the mattress in the corner, shivering violently beneath every blanket they owned. His skin had taken on a grayish tint that made Elena's heart stop. She pressed her hand to his forehead, burning, fever so high she could feel the heat radiating from him like a furnace. 104 degrees, maybe higher. Marco, she shook him gently. Marco, wake up. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Elena, you're home. I need to get you medicine. Fever reducer. Can you hold on for 20 minutes? But even as she said it, Elena knew the truth. The free clinic was closed. The pharmacy wouldn't give her anything without payment, and she had $90 to her name money she needed for food, for bus fare, to Marco's hospital appointments, for keeping them alive 1 more day. She couldn't spare $8 for Tylenol. Marco's hand found hers, fingers like ice despite the fever. It's okay, he whispered. I'm okay. He wasn't okay. He was dying, and Elena had just lost the only job that might have bought him a few more weeks. Sophia appeared in the doorway, clutching a piece of paper. At 12 years old, she was small for her age, with dark hair like Elena's and eyes that had seen too much suffering. Her hands moved in sign language, quick and desperate. Sister, I made something for you. She held out the drawing. 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. Crude crayon strokes showing a family, Elena tall in the center, Marco on one side, Sophia and Lucia on the other. All of them smiling. All of them together. At the bottom, In careful letters, "Don't be sad. We love you." Something cracked in Elena's chest. She pulled Sophia close, buried her face in her sister's hair, and tried not to break completely. From the bedroom came a wet, hacking cough. Elena released Sophia and rushed in to find Lucia sitting up on the mattress they all shared, small hand pressed to her mouth. When she pulled it away, blood dotted her palm. 8 years old, born with a congenital heart defect, every day her heart struggled more, the muscle deteriorating, the clock counting down to the moment it would simply stop. "Elena?" Lucia's voice was so small, so frightened. "Am I going to die?" The question hung in the freezing air like a ghost. Elena knelt beside her youngest sister, wrapped her arms around that tiny, fragile body. "No, baby, no. You're not going to die, I promise. But Marco's sick, and Sophia can't hear. And you work all the time, but we still don't have food." Tears spilled down Lucia's cheeks. "I heard you crying last night. I know we don't have money. I know. Stop." Elena held her tighter. "You're not going to die. None of you are. I'm going to fix this." "How?" Elena had no answer. She just held Lucia until the little girl's breathing evened out, until she fell asleep against Elena's shoulder. Sophia crawled onto the mattress beside them, curled up on Elena's other side. Marco's fever-roughened breathing filled the room like a death rattle. Elena looked at them, her 3 siblings, her entire world, slowly dying because she couldn't earn enough money scrubbing toilets and washing dishes. The math was simple, brutal, impossible. Marco needed $380,000 for the bone marrow transplant. Lucia needed $250,000 for heart surgery. Sophia's cochlear implants would cost $150,000, plus rent, plus food, plus medicine, $780,000. She had 90. No job, no prospects, no time. In 2 weeks, Marco would be dead. In 6 months, Lucia would follow. And Sophia would live her entire life in silence, unable to hear her own voice, unable to hear music or laughter or the sound of rain. Unless Elena did something drastic, she waited until all 3 of them slept. Then she carefully extracted herself, tucked the blankets around their shivering bodies, and went to the kitchen table. Her hands shook as she pulled out a piece of paper and a pen. "Dear Marco, Sophia, and Lucia, if you're reading this, it means I didn't come back. It means I tried something dangerous and it went wrong. I need you to know that everything I did for you. You are the only good things in my life. The only reasons I keep fighting. Marco, you're so smart, so brave. Don't let this disease define you. Fight. Live. Become the programmer you've always dreamed of being. Sophia, your silence doesn't make you less. Your art speaks louder than words ever could. Never stop drawing. Never stop creating beauty. Lucia, you have the biggest heart I've ever known. Even if yours doesn't work right. Be kind, be fierce. Run and play and live. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't save you the right way. I'm sorry I had to become a thief. But I would rather die trying than sit here and watch you fade away. Forever yours, Elena." She folded the letter, left it on the table where they'd find it in the morning if she didn't return. Then she went to the closet and pulled out the darkest clothes she owned. Black jeans, black sweater, black canvas shoes with worn soles. The Fontaine estate would be mostly empty tonight. Dante would be at some business dinner. Vivienne at a spa appointment Elena had overheard her booking it this morning. The staff would be minimal, just a few security guards doing routine patrols. Elena had worked there for 8 months. She knew the blind spots in the camera coverage, knew which windows didn't lock properly, knew where the most valuable items were kept. She could get in, grab whatever she could carry, paintings, jewelry, silverware, fence it through the pawn shops in the south side. It wouldn't be $380,000, but it might be enough for Marco's deposit, enough to buy him a few more weeks. And if she got caught? If Dante Fontaine's guards found her breaking into his home? Elena looked at her siblings sleeping peacefully, unaware that their sister was about to risk everything. She thought about Sal's threat, 7 days to pay $84,000 or face worse than a beating. She thought about Dr. Patel's grave face, 2 weeks, maybe less. She thought about Lucia coughing blood, Sophia's silent screams, Marco's fever-bright eyes, and she made her choice. Better to die trying than to watch them die doing nothing. Elena checked the kitchen clock, 10:47. She laced up her shoes, pulled a backpack over her shoulders, tucked a small flashlight into her pocket. At 11 o'clock exactly, she kissed each of her siblings on the forehead, Marco burning with fever, Sophia's face peaceful in sleep, Lucia's tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. "I'll come back," she whispered. "I promise. I'll come back with enough money to save you all." Then Elena Moretti stepped out into the freezing February night and became a criminal. The Fontaine estate waited in the darkness like a sleeping dragon, and Elena walked straight into its jaws. The Fontaine estate looked different at 1 in the morning, not like a mansion but like a fortress, all sharp angles and deep shadows, guarded by security cameras that swept the grounds in mechanical arcs. Elena crouched behind a cluster of oak trees 50 yards from the perimeter wall, watching the patrol patterns she'd memorized over 8 months of emptying trash bins and polishing silver. 2 guards, one at the front gate, one making rounds every 12 minutes. The cameras had blind spots, narrow corridors of darkness where the angles didn't quite meet. If she timed it right, she could slip through invisible. The wall was 12 feet high, topped with decorative iron spikes that would impale anyone stupid enough to climb straight over. But Elena had noticed something months ago. Something the architects probably thought was elegant but was actually a vulnerability. The old ivy that crawled up the western section of the wall, thick as rope, providing handholds all the way to the top. She waited for the patrol guard to round the corner, counted to 30, then ran. Her broken rib screamed with every footfall. She ignored it, reached the wall, grabbed the ivy with both hands and pulled herself up. The plant held. 6 feet, 8 feet, 10. At 11 feet, her hand closed around something sharp, barbed wire hidden in the ivy, rusty and vicious. It sliced through her palm like a razor, blood welled hot and fast, making her grip slippery. Elena bit down on her lip to keep from crying out, tasted copper. She couldn't let go, couldn't fall. Marco's face flashed in her mind, gray and fever-sick. Lucia coughing blood, Sophia's silent tears. Elena gripped the ivy harder, blood running down her wrist, and hauled herself over the top of the wall. The iron spikes missed her face by inches. She dropped into the manicured garden on the other side, landing in a crouch that sent agony shooting through her ribs. She pressed her bleeding hand against her jacket, trying to stop the flow. No time for pain, no time for fear. The cameras swept in predictable patterns. Elena moved through the blind spots like a ghost past the marble fountain, through the rose garden where winter had left the bushes skeletal, along the hedge maze that Vivienne had complained about wanting to redesign. The basement window was where she remembered it. Old, Victorian. The latch had been broken for months. Mrs. Hawthorne had mentioned it to the maintenance staff twice, but they kept forgetting to fix it. Elena pried it open with her pocket knife. The hinges shrieked softly. She froze, listening. Nothing. She slipped through the window into darkness. The basement smelled of dust and old wine. Elena pulled out her flashlight, cupped her hand around the beam to keep it dim. The stairs creaked under her weight as she climbed. She'd planned to go straight to Vivienne's room jewelry, designer handbags, anything she could fence quickly. But as she reached the main floor, her feet carried her somewhere else, to the door at the end of the east wing. Dante's private study, the room he'd forbidden anyone to enter, the room where he kept the memories of his dead sister Isabella. Elena had cleaned every room in this mansion except that one. She'd seen Dante go in sometimes, late at night, and emerge hours later with red-rimmed eyes. Why was she going there now? There wouldn't be jewelry, probably no cash, just memories. But her hand was already on the doorknob. The door opened silently. The study was exactly as she'd imagined. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk with a leather chair, and photographs, everywhere, covering the walls, the desk, the mantel above the fireplace, all of the same young woman, Isabella Fontaine. Elena's flashlight beam swept across a face that could have been carved from porcelain. 25 years old in most of the photos, long dark hair, gray eyes identical to Dante's, a smile that seemed to hold the sun. In one photo, she stood beside Dante, her arm around his waist, both of them laughing at something off camera. The way he looked at her, protective, adoring, the way an older brother should look at his sister. Elena had never known what that felt like, to have someone strong enough to protect you. She moved deeper into the room, drawn by something she couldn't name. Her hip bumped the desk. An old leather-bound album slid off the edge and hit the floor with a soft thud. Elena's heart stopped. She listened for footsteps, for alarms, for guards rushing to investigate. Silence. She bent to pick up the album, and something fell out from between the pages. A yellowed envelope. Old paper. Creased from being folded and unfolded many times. No address. Just a name written in feminine handwriting. Dante. Elena shouldn't open it. Shouldn't touch it. This wasn't why she was here. But her fingers were already sliding the letter out. The handwriting was shaky, like someone had written it while crying. Dante, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I need you to know it wasn't an accident. Vivian poisoned me. Arsenic in my tea. Every day, for 6 months. I didn't realize until it was too late. Until the doctors said my organs were failing and there was nothing they could do. I have proof. Medical records. Test results showing arsenic in my system. I've hidden everything in the false bottom of my jewelry box. The one Mom gave me for my 18th birthday. The one with the emerald clasp. Vivienne wants you, Dante. She wants our family's money, our power, our name. I was in the way, so she removed me. Please, don't marry her. Don't let her win. Don't let my death be for nothing. And forgive yourself. You couldn't have known. You couldn't have stopped this. It's not your fault. I love you, big brother. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. Bella Elena read it twice. 3 times. The words blurred as her hands shook. Murder. Vivienne Ashford, the woman who'd ground her heel into Elena's ribs, who'd made her lick tea off designer shoes, had murdered Dante's sister. Slowly, deliberately, over 6 months of poisoned tea. And in 2 days, Dante was going to marry her. Elena's mind raced. This wasn't her business. This wasn't why she'd broken in. She needed to grab valuables and get out before, but the letter said there was proof. Medical records. In Isabella's jewelry box. If Elena took that evidence to the police, Vivienne would go to prison. Dante would call off the wedding. Justice would be served. And what would that get Elena? Nothing. Not the money Marco needed. Not the surgery for Lucia. Not the cochlear implants for Sophia. She should leave this letter here. Pretend she never saw it. Take what she came for and go. But Elena's feet were already moving toward the bookshelf, where she'd noticed a mahogany jewelry box months ago while dusting. Mrs. Hawthorne had told her it belonged to Dante's late sister, that he'd requested it be displayed here, untouched, exactly as Isabella had left it. The box was beautiful dark wood inlaid with mother of pearl, an emerald clasp shaped like a rose. Elena opened it with trembling hands. Inside, delicate gold chains, pearl earrings, a sapphire ring, things worth thousands of dollars that Elena could easily steal. But her fingers moved to the silk lining at the bottom, pressed down, felt it give slightly. A false bottom. She pried it up, and there, hidden for 3 years, was everything Isabella had promised. Medical records from University of Chicago Medical Center. Blood test results highlighting arsenic levels in red ink toxic, lethal amounts. Pathology reports showing organ damage consistent with chronic poisoning. Doctor's notes that had been overridden, probably bought off. And a USB drive in a small plastic bag with a note. Security footage. Her confession. Everything you need. Elena stared at the evidence in her hands. This could destroy Vivienne, could expose a murder, could save Dante from marrying his sister's killer. But it wouldn't save Marco. Wouldn't save Lucia or Sophia. She had seconds to decide. Take the jewelry, get the money, save her family, or take the evidence. Stop a wedding, save a man who'd fired her without mercy. Elena's hand closed around the USB drive, and that's when the lights blazed on. Elena stood frozen in the blinding light, the USB drive clutched in her bleeding hand, medical records scattered at her feet. For one paralyzed heartbeat, she thought she was alone, that she'd accidentally triggered a motion sensor, that she had seconds to run. Then she saw her. Vivienne Ashford stood in the doorway like a vision from a nightmare, platinum hair perfect even at 2 a.m, wearing a white silk robe that probably cost more than Elena's rent. But it was her eyes that made Elena's blood turn to ice. Those pale blue eyes weren't surprised, weren't shocked. They were amused. Well, well. Vivienne's smile was razor sharp. A little rat in my study. My study, not Dante's, not the Fontaine family's, already claiming ownership. Elena's voice came out as a croak. I was just breaking and entering? Stealing? Vivienne stepped into the room, and Elena heard what she'd missed before footsteps behind her. Heavy boots, multiple people, 4 bodyguards in black suits materialized from the hallway, not the regular estate security. These were Vivienne's personal detail, men with cold eyes and bulges under their jackets that could only be weapons. Elena's gaze darted to the window. Locked, the door blocked, no escape. You've been here for 17 minutes, Vivienne said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. I got the alert the moment you climbed over the wall. The barbed wire in the ivy was a nice touch. Don't you think? I had that installed last month specifically for rats like you. The cut on Elena's palm throbbed. She'd been bleeding this whole time, leaving a trail, leaving evidence. This had been a trap from the beginning. The USB drive, Vivienne said, holding out her hand. Give it to me. Elena's fingers tightened around it. This was the only proof, the only thing that could stop the wedding, Expose the murder. Bring justice for Isabella. No. Vivian's smile widened. She nodded to the nearest guard. He grabbed Elena's wrist, twisted it viciously. Bones ground together. Elena cried out, dropped the USB drive. It clattered to the hardwood floor. Vivian picked it up delicately, as if it were a dead insect. Then she collected the medical records. Isabella's letter. Every piece of evidence that had been hidden for 3 years. Curious little thing, aren't you? She examined the USB drive. I wondered where Isabella had hidden the backup. I found the first one years ago. Destroyed it. But she was always so thorough, always 2 steps ahead. Vivian's expression darkened. Not ahead enough, though. Elena watched her tuck the evidence into her robe pocket. You killed her. You poisoned her for 6 months and watched her die. I gave her mercy. Vivian's voice was ice. Isabella was weak, soft. She would have convinced Dante to leave the family business, turn legitimate, donate the fortune to charity. Can you imagine? Billions of dollars wasted on homeless shelters and orphanages. She laughed. I saved the Fontaine empire. I made sure it stayed powerful. And in 2 days, I'll be the one controlling it. Dante will never marry you if he knows. But he won't know. Vivian crouched down to Elena's level, grabbed her chin with manicured nails. Because you'll be dead. Or in prison, whichever comes first. She stood, pulled out her phone, snapped a photo of Elena kneeling in Dante's forbidden study, surrounded by Isabella's belongings. Perfect, Vivian murmured. The fired maid, so desperate she broke into her former employer's home to steal valuables. When caught, she became violent. That's not Vivian's fist slammed into Elena's stomach, right where Sal had kicked her, right where Vivian's heel had broken her rib hours earlier. The pain was nuclear, white-hot agony that ripped through Elena's entire body. She collapsed, couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. The broken rib ground against her lung, and for a terrifying moment she thought it had punctured through. That's for climbing my wall. Vivian's heel came down on Elena's hand, the same hand already bleeding from the barbed wire. The stiletto heel drove through skin, through muscle, scraped bone. Elena's scream was soundless. Her vision went black at the edges. That's for touching Isabella's things. Another kick to the ribs. Another. The guard stood watching, impassive, as Vivian beat the maid who dared to discover the truth. When Elena finally stopped trying to curl into a protective ball, when she lay flat on the floor gasping like a fish drowning in air, Vivian grabbed her hair and yanked her head up. Let me tell you a story, she hissed, face inches from Elena's. I grew up in a trailer park in Gary, Indiana. My mother was a drunk. My father was in prison. I had nothing. Less than nothing. She released Elena's hair, let her head crack against the floor. But I was beautiful. And I was smart. And I learned something very important. The world doesn't reward hard work. It rewards ruthlessness. So I used my beauty to get close to powerful men. I used my intelligence to destroy anyone in my way. And I clawed up from the gutter to the top of Chicago society. Vivian crouched again, voice dropping to a whisper. You think you're special because you work 4 jobs? Because you sacrifice for your siblings? You're not special. You're just stupid. I sacrificed too. I did what needed to be done. The difference is, I won. She stood, brushed invisible dust from her robe. Your brother Marco is at University of Chicago Medical Center? Yes? Room 417? And your sisters are home alone right now. How unfortunate if something were to happen. Elena's blood turned to ice. Don't you dare. If you tell anyone about what you found tonight, anyone at all, Marco's oxygen tube will mysteriously malfunction. Sophia will have a tragic accident on the stairs. And little Lucia's heart monitor will fail at a very inconvenient moment. Vivian smiled. All accidents. Of course. Tragic. But accidents. You're a monster. I'm a survivor. You're the monster, breaking into someone's home, trying to steal their valuables. Vivian nodded to the guards. Take her to the basement, the cold storage room. 2 guards grabbed Elena under the arms, hauled her to her feet. She tried to fight, tried to scream, but a massive hand clamped over her mouth. They dragged her through the mansion past the sitting room where she'd licked tea off Vivian's shoes, past the kitchen where she'd prepared countless meals, down the servant stairs she'd climbed 1,000 times, to a door she'd never noticed before. The cold storage room, where the estate kept wine at precise temperatures, where the thermometer read 36 degrees Fahrenheit, just above freezing. They threw Elena inside. She hit the concrete floor hard, felt something in her shoulder tear. The door slammed shut. A lock clicked. Darkness, complete and absolute, and cold. The kind of cold that seeped into bones, that made breath visible in clouds, that killed slowly but surely. Elena pressed her hands against the steel door, pounded weakly. "Let me out, please." No response. She was alone in the dark, bleeding, broken, freezing. And Vivienne had the evidence. Had photos of Elena breaking in, had threatened her siblings. If Elena somehow survived this, if she made it out alive, Vivienne would destroy her family, would make Marco's oxygen fail, would push Sophia down the stairs, would sabotage Lucia's heart monitor, unless Elena stayed silent, unless she died quietly in this freezing room and let the secret die with her. Elena slid down the door, pulled her knees to her chest. Her breath came in short gasps. The cold was already numbing her fingers, her toes. She thought about Marco lying in his hospital bed, fever burning him alive, about Sophia's drawing 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a rainbow, about Lucia asking if she was going to die. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered into the darkness. I tried so hard." The cold wrapped around her like a shroud, and in Dante's study 3 floors above, Vivienne fed Isabella's letter and medical records into the fireplace, watching 3 years of evidence curl into ash. Then she climbed into bed beside Chicago's most dangerous man, kissed his cheek as he slept, and dreamed of her wedding day. Elena's body was shutting down. She could feel it happening, the way her fingers had stopped hurting and gone numb, the way her breathing had slowed to shallow gasps, the way her thoughts were getting fuzzy and distant like she was sinking underwater. Hypothermia. She'd read about it once. How the cold killed you gently, made you sleepy, convinced you to just close your eyes and rest. She'd been in the cold storage room for 6 hours, 6 hours of darkness and 36-degree air leaching the warmth from her body degree by degree. She was going to die here, in a basement, alone, and Vivienne would win. No, the word cut through the fog in Elena's mind like a knife. Marco was dying. Sophia couldn't hear. Lucia was coughing blood. They needed her. And if she died here, Vivienne would marry Dante tomorrow, would control billions, would get away with murder, Isabella's murder. Elena forced her numb hands to move, padding along the walls of her prison. There had to be something, some weakness, some way out. The room was small, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, concrete walls, steel door, a drain in the floor, wine racks along one wall, mostly empty, and in the ceiling, a vent, old, rusted, probably original to the house, installed 100 years ago when Victorian mansions needed complex ventilation systems. Elena dragged a wine rack under the vent, climbed on top with legs that barely held her weight. The vent cover was screwed in. She had no tools, but she had desperation. She gripped the metal grating with both hands and pulled. Her broken fingers screamed. The wound in her palm reopened, blood making her grip slippery. But the old screws were rusty, and after 30 minutes of agonized pulling, the grating came free. The vent shaft was narrow, barely 18 inches wide. Elena was thin from months of skipping meals, but even so, it would be tight. She pulled herself up, squeezed into the shaft. The metal cut into her shoulders. Her broken rib grated against itself, sending waves of nausea through her body. But she crawled forward, inch by inch, through darkness that smelled of rust and mold. The shaft turned, narrowed. Elena's shoulders wedged tight. For a horrible moment she was stuck, couldn't move forward or back, buried alive in a metal coffin. She forced herself to exhale completely, collapsed her chest, pulled with her arms. Something in her left hand gave way with a wet snap, another finger breaking, but she was moving again. Forward, always forward. After an eternity, she saw light, gray morning light filtering through another vent. She kicked it out, tumbled through, landed hard on a basement floor in a different section of the mansion, the storage room where they kept old furniture. Elena checked her watch with her good hand. 8:17 a.m. She'd been trapped for over 6 hours. She'd lost the USB drive, lost Isabella's evidence, lost everything. But she was alive. Elena stumbled through the basement, up the servant stairs, out a side door into the February morning. Snow was falling thick and fast, covering Chicago in white. She made it to the street before her legs gave out, collapsed against a brick wall, gasping. A memory surfaced. Something Mrs. Hawthorne had said months ago while they were cleaning Dante's study together. Poor Mr. Dante. He donated Isabella's real jewelry box to St. Patrick's Cathedral for the wedding, said he wanted her to be there in spirit. It's in the vault with the other valuable donations. Elena's heart stopped. The real jewelry box. Not the one in Dante's study that had been a decoy. The real one, with the real evidence, was at the cathedral, where Dante was getting married. Today, at 2 p.m., Elena looked at her watch. 8:23. 5 hours and 37 minutes. She had no phone, no money. The hospital was 8 miles away. She needed to check on her siblings. Make sure Vivian hadn't already hurt them. The cathedral was another 3 miles beyond that. 11 miles total. In the snow, with broken ribs, broken fingers, and a body on the edge of hypothermia, Elena stood up and started running. She made it 2 miles before the first fall. Her feet went out from under her on an icy patch, and she went down hard on her knees. Blood bloomed through her torn jeans. She got up, kept running. At mile 4, she collapsed outside the hospital, dragged herself to the window of Marco's room on the first floor, saw him sleeping, oxygen mask on his face, chest rising and falling, still alive. Elena pressed her hand to the glass. "Hold on, Marco. Just hold on." She pushed herself up, kept running. At mile 7, her shoulder, the one she'd injured falling in the cold storage room, dislocated. The pain made her vision go white. She stumbled into an alley, slammed her shoulder against a brick wall, felt it pop back into place with a sickening crunch, vomited from the agony, kept running. At mile 9, she didn't see the patch of black ice. Her feet flew out from under her and she went down face first. Her head cracked against the pavement. Everything went dark. When Elena opened her eyes, she was lying in the snow, staring up at a gray sky. Her watch read 1:45 p.m. She'd been unconscious for 20 minutes. The wedding started at 2. Elena's body refused to move. Every nerve screamed at her to stay down, to give up, to let the cold take her. She thought about Vivian's smile as she fed Isabella's letter into the fire, thought about Dante marrying his sister's murderer, thought about evil winning because good people were too tired to fight. She thought about Marco, Sophia, Lucia, and she got up. Street. Patrick's Cathedral was still 6 blocks away. Elena could see the spire rising above the buildings like a beacon. She ran. Not with her legs anymore, those had given out, but with pure will, with the kind of desperate strength that only comes when you've got nothing left to lose. 4 blocks. 3. 2. She could hear music now. Organ music. The wedding processional. 1 block. Elena crashed through the cathedral doors just as the priest raised his hands and began to speak. 600 heads turned. 600 pairs of eyes locked onto the maid in the torn, blood-soaked clothes. And Elena screamed the words that would change everything. "Stop this wedding." The heavy oak door slammed shut, cutting off the gasps and whispers of 600 wedding guests. Dante Fontaine stood with his back to the door, gray eyes fixed on the trembling, bleeding maid who'd just destroyed what should have been the most important day of his life. Elena swayed on her feet, vision swimming. Now that the adrenaline was fading, she could feel everything, the broken ribs grinding together, the dislocated shoulder screaming, the fingers bent at wrong angles, the hypothermia still making her thoughts sluggish. "You have 60 seconds. Dante's voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "Talk." Elena opened her mouth. Where did she even start? How did she explain breaking into his home, finding his dead sister's letter, discovering that his fiancé was a murderer? "Your sister," she gasped. "Isabella. She didn't die of natural causes. She was murdered." Dante's expression didn't change. "You have 50 seconds, and so far, you're wasting them with insane conspiracy theories." It's not. Elena's knees buckled. She caught herself against the wall. Vivienne poisoned her, arsenic in her tea. For 6 months. I found the letter. I found the proof. You're lying. But something flickered in Dante's eyes. Something that might have been fear. "You're a thief and a liar who broke into my home. This is revenge because I fired you." "Then explain this." With her good hand, Elena reached into her shirt and pulled out the folded piece of paper she'd hidden there. The copy of Isabella's letter she'd made on her phone before Vivienne had destroyed the original. She'd printed it at a 24-hour copy shop during those frantic hours trying to reach the cathedral. She thrust it at Dante. He took it, hands steady, but as his eyes scanned the first line, Elena saw his fingers begin to shake. "Dante, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I need you to know it wasn't an accident." The color drained from his face. "Vivienne poisoned me. Arsenic in my tea. Every day for 6 months. His jaw clenched so hard Elena heard his teeth grind. "I have proof. Medical records. Test results. I've hidden everything in the false bottom of my jewelry box, the one Mom gave me for my 18th birthday. Dante's hands were trembling violently now. He read each word like it was a knife cutting into him. "Don't marry her. Don't let her win. Don't let my death be for nothing. This," his voice cracked, "this can't be real. This is Bella's handwriting. But the proof is in the vault," Elena said urgently. "Isabella's jewelry box. The real one. The one you donated to this cathedral for the wedding. Mrs. Hawthorne told me about it. The box with the emerald clasp. Check the false bottom. Dante stared at her for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then he pulled out his phone, pressed a single button. Vincent, get in here. Now. The door opened immediately. A man in his early 40s stepped in tall, lean, with sharp eyes that took in the scene instantly. Vincent Kane, Dante's most trusted advisor. The only person in the world Dante actually listened to. Boss, what's open the cathedral vault? Dante's voice was steel. Find Isabella's jewelry box. The one with the emerald clasp. Bring it here. You have 3 minutes. Vincent's eyes widened. Sir, the wedding now. Vincent ran. The silence that followed was suffocating. Dante stood like a statue, still holding Isabella's letter. Elena leaned against the wall, trying to stay conscious. Blood dripped from her torn knees onto the expensive carpet. If you're lying, Dante said quietly, I will destroy you. Not quickly, not cleanly. I will make you wish you'd never been born. I'm not lying. You broke into my home. You were caught stealing. You have every reason to sabotage this wedding. I have 3 siblings dying in the hospital. Elena's voice broke. I need money more than I need revenge. If I was going to lie, I'd ask you for a payoff to keep quiet. Instead, I ran 11 miles through the snow to stop you from marrying a murderer. Because it's the right thing to do. Dante's eyes met hers. For the first time, she saw something other than ice. Something like recognition. The door burst open. Vincent stumbled in, holding a mahogany jewelry box with an emerald clasp shaped like a rose. Found it in the vault with the donations. He set it on the small table. Boss, what's this about? Dante opened the box with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Removed the silk lining. Found the false bottom exactly where Isabella's letter said it would be. And there it was. Medical records, pathology reports, blood test results showing lethal levels of arsenic, and a USB drive in a plastic bag. Dante's face went from pale to gray to ashen. He looked like a man watching his world collapse in real time. Vincent, your laptop. Now. Vincent pulled out a sleek laptop from his briefcase, powered it on. Dante grabbed the USB drive, hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He inserted it, clicked the only folder, evidence. The first file was a video, security footage from inside the Fontaine estate, dated 3 years ago. The sitting room where Elena had been humiliated just yesterday. Isabella sat on the crimson sofa, pale and beautiful, reading a book. Vivienne entered, carrying a tea service, set it down, poured Earl Grey into a delicate cup, and when Isabella wasn't looking, Vivienne pulled a small vial from her pocket and shook white powder into the tea, stirred it, smiled. The video jumped to another date. The same scene. Vivienne poisoning the tea again. 6 different dates. 6 different poisonings. All captured on the security system Isabella must have set up secretly. The next files were emails. Vivienne's personal account, purchasing arsenic from a dark web supplier. 300 grams. Untraceable. Odorless. Tasteless. Then bank transfers. $500,000 to Dr. Richard Morrison at University of Chicago Medical Center. With a note. For your discretion regarding the Fontaine case. Natural heart failure only on the death certificate. Dante watched all of it. Every piece of evidence. His sister being murdered slowly over 6 months while he'd been too busy running his empire to notice she was dying. When the final video ended, he dropped to his knees. The most powerful man in Chicago knelt on the floor of a cathedral coat room and broke. 3 years. His voice was raw. 3 years I blamed myself. I thought I failed her. Thought if I'd just paid more attention, if I'd forced her to see better doctors, if I'd his fist slammed into the floor, knuckles splitting. She killed Bella. The words came out strangled. That woman, the woman I was about to marry, she murdered my sister. Elena sank down beside him, her own strength finally giving out. And she'll kill you too. Dante's head snapped up. What? Last night, before she locked me in the freezer to die, I heard her on the phone with someone, talking about the champagne toast. How you'd be handled the same way Isabella was. Once you sign the marriage certificate, once she's legally your wife and heir to your fortune, you're dead. Dante stood slowly, and Elena watched the transformation happen in real time, grief hardening into fury, guilt calcifying into rage. When he looked at her, his gray eyes were no longer ice. They were fire. She won't get away with this. His voice was quiet, deadly, the voice of a man who'd built an empire on the bodies of his enemies. He pulled out his phone, made 2 calls. Father Martinez, delay the ceremony. Technical difficulties with the organ. 20 minutes. Then, Detective Morrison, FBI. This is Dante Fontaine. I need you at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Now. I have evidence of a murder. Isabella Fontaine. And I know who killed her. He turned to Vincent. Set up the projector in the cathedral. I want that video playing on every screen. Vincent's eyes widened. Boss, are you sure? The guests, the media, I want everyone to see. Dante's voice was steel. I want the whole world to know what Vivian Ashford did. He looked at Elena. Really looked at her for the first time. Saw the blood, the broken fingers, the hypothermia. The sheer will that had kept her running 11 miles to save a man who'd treated her like garbage. Why? He asked simply. Why did you risk everything? Elena met his eyes. Because letting a murderer win was worse than dying trying to stop her. For a long moment, Dante said nothing. Then he removed his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Thank you, he said quietly. You saved my life, and you gave me back my sister's truth. He opened the door. Outside, 600 people waited, and Dante Fontaine walked out to destroy the woman he'd almost married. Dante Fontaine stepped out of the coat room and back into the cathedral like a man walking to his own execution. 600 faces turned toward him, waiting, wondering. The organ music had stopped. The whispers had died. In the terrible silence, even breathing seemed too loud. Vivienne stood in the center of the aisle, still radiant in her $1,000,000 gown, bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. When she saw Dante, her face transformed into perfect concern. Darling, her voice carried across the cathedral, sweet as poisoned honey. Is everything all right? That poor woman seemed so confused. I think she might need medical help, Vincent. Dante's voice cut through hers like a blade. Set up the projector. Vivienne's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. What? Dante. The ceremony now. Vincent moved with military precision. Within 90 seconds, a massive screen descended from the ceiling behind the altar. A projector hummed to life. Laptop connected. Ready. The guests shifted in their seats. Confused murmurs rippled through the pews. Politicians exchanged glances. Mafia bosses leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. Dante walked to the center of the aisle, stopped 3 feet from his bride. His gray eyes, the ones that had looked at her with something like love for 2 years, were now empty, dead. Before I marry, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral. There's something everyone needs to see. Dante, please. Vivienne's mask was cracking. Whatever that maid told you, she's lying. She broke into our home. She's clearly unstable. Dante nodded to Vincent. The screen blazed to life, and 600 people watched Isabella Fontaine die. The first video showed the sitting room of the Fontaine estate. Isabella, alive and beautiful, 3 years ago, sitting on the crimson sofa reading, Vivienne entering with a tea service, pouring Earl Grey, and then so casual, so practiced pulling a vial from her pocket and shaking white powder into the cup. Gasps erupted from the crowd. The video jumped. Different date. Same scene. Vivienne poisoning the tea again. And again. And again. 6 times. 6 different poisonings captured on security footage, time-stamped and dated, all within a 6-month period before Isabella's death. A woman in the 3rd row screamed. A man stood up, shouting. Chaos began to spread like wildfire. It's fake. Vivienne's voice cracked like breaking glass. It's photoshopped, edited. She pointed a shaking finger at Elena, still standing in the doorway of the coat room, bleeding and broken. That maid did this. She's trying to ruin us because Dante fired her. Then explain this. Dante's voice was ice. Vincent stepped forward with a folder. Medical records, pathology reports. He handed them to the front row, a U.S. senator, a federal judge, the Chicago chief of police. Let them examine the evidence with their own eyes. Blood tests showing lethal arsenic levels. Doctor's notes documenting organ failure consistent with chronic poisoning. Bank records showing $500,000 paid to Dr. Richard Morrison for falsifying Isabella's death certificate. And explain this. Dante's voice rose, filling the cathedral. I had my sister's body exhumed last week. A new autopsy was performed by an independent pathologist. Arsenic levels in her remains match exactly the levels shown in these medical records. Isabella Fontaine didn't die of natural causes. She was murdered. Slowly, deliberately. Over 6 months, the cathedral erupted. Screams, shouts, cameras flashing as journalists realized they were witnessing the scandal of the decade. Vivienne went from pale to crimson to chalk white in 3 seconds. You had her exhumed? You had no right, she was my sister. Dante's roar silenced the crowd. And you killed her! The heavy doors at the back of the cathedral burst open. FBI agents in tactical gear stormed in, led by a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen everything, Detective Sarah Morrison, no relation to the corrupt doctor, Vivienne Ashford. Her voice carried the weight of federal authority. You're under arrest for the murder of Elena Fontaine, conspiracy to commit murder, bribery of a federal official, and attempted murder of Dante Fontaine. Vivienne's perfect composure shattered. No. She backed away, designer heels catching on the white carpet. No, you can't. I didn't. She tried to run. 2 agents caught her before she made it 5 steps, grabbed her arms. She fought like a wild animal, screaming, clawing, the beautiful mask completely destroyed. Let me go. You don't understand. I loved him. I did it for us. They forced her to her knees in the center of the aisle, surrounded by 600 witnesses. Vivienne looked up at Dante, tears streaming down her face, makeup running in black streaks. I loved you, she sobbed. I did everything for you. Isabella was weak. She was going to ruin you, make you soft, destroy everything you built. I saved you. I gave you back your strength. And we were supposed to rule together. We were supposed to. You loved my money. Dante's voice was quiet, deadly. You never loved me. You loved power. You killed my sister for an empire you were never going to have. Vivienne's face twisted with rage. She turned, spotted Elena still standing in the doorway, barely conscious. This is your fault, Vivienne shrieked. You stupid bitch. You ruined everything. Do you think he loves you? Do you think he'll be grateful? He doesn't love you. He'll never love someone like you, broken, poor, pathetic. You're nothing. Nothing. Elena, swaying on her feet, bleeding and hypothermic and barely able to stand, met Vivienne's eyes. Maybe, she said quietly, but I can sleep at night. Vivienne screamed, an inhuman sound of pure fury. She lunged toward Elena, but the agents yanked her back, slammed handcuffs on her wrists. Vivienne Ashford, you have the right to remain silent. They dragged her down the aisle. She fought every step, screaming obscenities, threats, promises of revenge. The cathedral doors closed behind her, muffling her voice. Silence crashed down like a falling building. 600 people sat in stunned shock. The wedding of the century had just become the arrest of the century. Phones were already out, streaming live to the world. By tomorrow, this would be international news. Dante stood alone at the altar in his wedding tux, surrounded by white lilies that suddenly looked like funeral flowers. He turned to look at Elena. She was still standing in the doorway of the coat room, wrapped in his jacket that was 3 sizes too big. Blood dripped from her knees. Her broken fingers hung at odd angles. Her face was so pale it looked translucent. But she was standing. Their eyes met across the cathedral. And for the first time in 3 years, Dante Fontaine felt something other than cold emptiness. He felt gratitude and shame, and the beginning of something that might have been respect. He started walking toward her. Elena tried to smile, tried to say something, but her legs finally gave out. She collapsed. Dante ran, caught her before she hit the marble floor, lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing. "Someone call an ambulance!" he shouted. "Now!" Elena's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "My siblings," she whispered. "Marco, Sophia, Lucia, please, make sure I'll take care of them." Dante's voice was fierce. "I promise, I'll take care of everything." "Why?" Elena's voice was fading. "You fired me. You hated me. Because you saved my life." Dante looked down at the broken woman in his arms. "And you gave me back the truth. You're the bravest person I've ever met." Elena's eyes closed. And as the ambulance sirens wailed closer, Dante Fontaine held the maid who'd destroyed his wedding and saved his soul, and made a silent vow. He would spend the rest of his life making sure she never had to fight alone again. Elena woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of a heart monitor. The hospital room was flooded with afternoon sunlight. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten here. Then the memories crashed back the cathedral. Vivienne's arrest, collapsing into Dante's arms. She turned her head and found him sitting in the chair beside her bed. Dante Fontaine looked different, still wearing expensive clothes, still radiating power, but something in his face had changed. The ice in his gray eyes had thawed. He looked human. "You're awake." He leaned forward. "How do you feel?" Elena's voice came out as a croak. "Like I ran 11 miles through a blizzard with broken ribs." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "The doctors say you'll make a full recovery. Broken ribs, 3 broken fingers, severe hypothermia, malnutrition. You should be dead. My siblings are fine. All 3 of them. I had guards posted at the hospital the moment Vivienne was arrested. Marco, Sophia, and Lucia are safe. Relief flooded through Elena so powerfully she almost wept. Dante stood, walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I need to ask you something. Why did you risk everything? I fired you, humiliated you, threw you out like garbage. You could have let me marry her. Let me die. You owed me nothing. Elena thought about lying. About giving him the answer he probably expected that she'd wanted reward money, or redemption, or revenge. But she'd nearly died for the truth. She might as well speak it, because it was the right thing to do, she said simply. No one should die because of someone else's greed. Not you, not Isabella, not anyone. Dante turned to look at her, and something in his expression cracked. 3 years, he said quietly. 3 years I've lived in darkness, blamed myself for my sister's death, became colder, harder, more ruthless. I convinced myself that caring about people made you weak, that the only thing that mattered was power. He walked back to her bedside. Then a maid I'd treated like dirt risked her life to save mine. You showed me that humanity still exists. That courage doesn't come from money or guns or fear. It comes from the human heart. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Let me help your siblings. Please. Let me pay for Marco's transplant, Sophia's cochlear implants, Lucia's heart surgery. No. Elena's voice was firm despite her weakness. I don't want charity. It's not charity. Dante's voice was equally firm. It's a debt. You gave me back the truth. You saved my life. You brought justice for my sister. That's worth more than any amount of money could ever repay. But let me try. Elena looked at him for a long moment, saw sincerity in those gray eyes, saw a man trying to become better. All right, she whispered. Thank you. 6 months passed like a dream. Marco's bone marrow transplant was successful. The leukemia went into complete remission. At 16 years old, he was finally healthy enough to attend school full-time. He discovered a passion for computer programming and spent his evenings building apps and websites. His mind as sharp as it had always been, but finally free from the fog of illness. Sophia's cochlear implant surgery changed her world. The first time she heard Elena's voice, she'd wept for an hour, signing over and over, "You sound like love." She was learning to speak now, her words halting but growing stronger every day. And her artwork, finally able to hear the world she'd been painting, had been featured in a gallery show at the Chicago Art Institute. Lucia's heart surgery gave her the childhood she'd been denied. At 8 years old, she could finally run, jump, play. She'd joined a youth soccer league and was, according to her coach, a tiny ball of unstoppable energy. Her laugh, bright and free, filled their new apartment constantly. And Elena Moretti was no longer cleaning toilets for $15 an hour. Dante had created the Isabella Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping families with catastrophic medical debt. He'd offered Elena the position of executive director, $120,000 a year, an office in downtown Chicago, the power to help people the way she'd once needed help. At first, she'd refused. Too much, too fast. She wasn't qualified. "You're the most qualified person I know," Dante had said. "You understand what it's like to choose between feeding your family and buying medicine. You know what desperation feels like. That's worth more than any business degree." So Elena had said yes. They lived in a 3-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood now. Heat that actually worked. A refrigerator full of food. Beds for each of the kids. Things Elena had once thought were impossible luxuries. And Dante had changed too. He'd stepped back from 70% of his Mafia operations, handed control to trusted lieutenants, and focused on legitimate business and philanthropy. He visited Isabella's grave every Sunday, brought white roses, told her about the foundation that bore her name. The darkness that had consumed him for 3 years was finally beginning to lift. On a warm August evening, Dante knocked on the door of Elena's apartment. The sound of chaos greeted him, Marco shouting about a coding error, Sophia practicing her speech therapy, Lucia singing at the top of her lungs. Elena opened the door, and Dante's breath caught. She looked different, healthy. Her face had color, her eyes sparkled. The shadows that had haunted her for so long were finally fading. "Uncle Dante," Lucia barreled into him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Sophia ran over, signing excitedly. Marco looked up from his laptop and grinned. When had he become Uncle Dante? When had this broken family become his? "Come in," Elena said, smiling. "We're about to eat dinner. Actually," Dante cleared his throat, "I was hoping I could steal you away, just for a few minutes." "The balcony?" Elena nodded, followed him out to the small balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting Chicago in shades of gold and amber. From here, you couldn't see the darkness, couldn't see the poverty, or violence, or despair. Just beauty. I've been thinking, Dante said, hands gripping the railing. About you, about us, about how you changed my life. Elena waited, heart hammering. For 3 years, I felt dead inside. Went through the motions, made money, gave orders, but I wasn't really alive. I was just existing. He turned to face her. You made me feel alive again. You reminded me what it means to be human, to care about something more than power. He stepped closer. I know I don't deserve it. I know I treated you horribly, but would you give me a chance? Not as your employer, not as someone who owes you a debt, just as a man who wants to know you, to spend time with you, to see if we, could be something real. Elena looked into those gray eyes, the eyes that had once been cold as winter, now warm like summer rain. I'd like that, she said softly. Dante smiled, really smiled, and Elena saw the man he could have been if tragedy hadn't hardened him, the man he was becoming again. Dinner? He asked, offering his hand. Elena took it. They walked back inside where Marco was setting the table. Sophia was drawing placemats, and Lucia was telling an elaborate story about her soccer game to anyone who would listen. 4 people sat down to dinner. Not a mafia boss and his employee, not a wealthy man and a poor woman, just 4 people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new. The laughter that filled the apartment was real, the warmth genuine, the hope fragile but growing stronger. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. Elena still woke up sometimes from nightmares about the cold storage room. Dante still carried guilt about Isabella. The kids still had hard days, but they had each other, and they had tomorrow. And that was enough. As the sun set over Chicago, casting golden light through the windows, Elena looked around the table and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Sometimes the person who saves you isn't wearing shining armor. Sometimes it's the one in a torn uniform, bleeding and broken, who still chooses to stand up. This story reminds us that courage doesn't come from money or power. It comes from the human heart, that doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything, is never a waste. That kindness and sacrifice can change the world, one life at a time. Elena could have walked away, could have let Dante marry his sister's murderer, could have focused only on saving her own family, but she chose to stand up for what was right, and that choice saved not just one life, but many. We want to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever met someone like Elena, someone willing to risk everything for another person, even with nothing to gain? Have you ever faced a moment where doing the right thing meant losing everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We truly want to hear what's in your heart, your stories, your experiences, because every one of you has witnessed courage in your own life. If this story touched you, please subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share this video with friends and loved ones. Help us spread stories that remind us what it means to be human, what it means to fight for each other. Every day, we bring you new stories, stories of courage, redemption, love, and hope. Stories that remind us that even in the darkest times, light can break through. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Your time is precious, and we're honored you spent it with us. We wish you good health, joyful days, and peace in your heart. See you in the next video. Goodbye for now.